8:26. It's Tuesday on 97X.
Fans of the band Van Halen will appreciate a new biography that has been written about Eddie Van Halen, or Edward, as he's noted in the book. It's called Edward Van Halen, A Definitive Biography by Kevin Dodds. And definitive it is, detailed it is, and could really have only been written by a guy who not only was a good writer, but a true student of the band. And he's on the phone with us. Hi, Kevin.
Hey, guys, how are you?
Pretty good. This is, you chronicle some of the darkest times in Eddie Van Halen's life, and a segment of which we're proud to be part of.
Our interviews with Eddie Van Halen that our listeners are pretty familiar with are actually transcribed and put in this book as a historical document. And it's really actually the worst part of the book, if you don't mind my saying, Kevin. How long did it take you to transcribe those interviews word for word?
Oh, geez. To transcribe that stuff, hours and hours a night for a while. And I sent them on to you guys, and you confirmed, they're pretty much word for word.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Well, the book is called Edward Van Halen, A Definitive Biography. And is this something that... Eddie didn't work with you on this, right?
No, he didn't. I'll tell you, I can give you a quick background real quick, is that, I'm a guitarist myself and played in bands, and I saw Van Halen in 1984 at the Summit in Houston, Texas. It was like watching a superhero movie unfold before your eyes. It wasn't real. It was just, there was something surreal about it.
Uh-huh.
It was just, I don't know, it's really hard to describe, but my buddy and I that went there, we were only 12 years old. The next day we were like, we need to be in a band. And, we're both almost 40 years old now, and we just played together just a few weeks ago. So, it had an impact on my life that changed my life forever.
And you kind of interject sort of stories like that throughout the book as to, where Van Halen's progress was and where you were at the time it was happening. It kind of gives good perspective.
He just inspired me. I mean, geez, I went out and bought a white guitar with black stripes on it with a tremolo bar,
Yeah.
He truly influenced me. So what happened was my buddy and I, we started this band, before we were even in high school, and we got to be pretty successful in high school, and then after high school we moved to Austin. We all went to University of Texas, and our band became, pretty successful. The only thing is we kind of hit a glass ceiling because we never wanted to get sleazy managers, and whenever we did, it just, reinforced that we like the music side, we don't like the business side, so we kind of called it a day, about a decade ago, and but we still reunite. We still play. We just stopped with the traveling and making our own CDs and stuff like that.
So now you make your living as an author?
But this is the first real book that I've really ever written.
And it really was a labor of love. You can read it, you can feel it when you read the book that you're writing about your idol and trying to keep it real throughout the entire book.
Yeah, and well, what happened was after my band, we kind of like faded out or whatever, but even though we still do play, I kind of stopped for a moment and I'm like, what is rock music? How did this stuff start? And how did this become such a huge part of defining who I am and who a whole generation of people are, rock and roll and rock music. And I started reading. And I read, rock history books and tons of books on Elvis and, Jimi Hendrix and the Beatles. And, I easily have, 150 books, just on rock. I just couldn't stop reading. And I tell you what, the one day I came up and I was like, why haven't I read the book on Eddie Van Halen yet? I got to go find that. So I started searching, and there was no book. There is no definitive biography on Eddie Van Halen. And I complained to my friends and my musician friends, and finally, after enough bitching by me, one of them goes, "Well, why don't you do it, man?"
Yeah.
And the reason there's not a book about him until now, and this I would say is probably the most detailed book about Eddie Van Halen. But I think the reason is evident in the book. He's not a fan of talking about himself. He's not
Exactly.
a fan of other people describing what they think of him. He's not a fan, and that's part of the crux of the interviews we did with him.
It turns out that the guy that runs the official Van Halen store website, he's a big fan of the book, and he's going to actually carry it on the official Van Halen store website.
So when you're doing your research, what surprised you? What did you learn about Eddie Van Halen that surprised you?
Oh man, one of the biggest things that surprised me was actually was something that came out of Valerie's book, her first book that she wrote. When you think of Eddie Van Halen, just stop for a second and get that picture in your head. The guitar god. One of the things that was just wild to me was when his mother fell and broke her hip when she was about 80, and Valerie and Eddie took care of her for like a month at their house, which included bathing her and feeding her and making sure she went to sleep and stuff, on time, and her medicine was regulated and stuff like that. Now, that was something that really blew my mind. I just don't think that people realize, that
he's a human.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, no. That he wouldn't hire a nurse or put her in a hospital or something. That he did this himself. He bathed his own mother by hand. I just thought that spoke volumes about his character.
Yeah.
And another thing that surprised me, I just had it. Was that he's still bilingual. He moved to the United States when he was 7. He didn't know any English because he was from the Netherlands and he only spoke Dutch. And it's just kind of a trip. If you think about it, you think about Eddie Van Halen, you're like, wow, at any second this guy could just start talking Dutch.
He is still fluent in Dutch. Is that right?
He is, yeah. So those are two things that would really, really surprise me. But otherwise, I've been following him for, like I said in the book, since I was basically 7 years old.
A lot of the information comes from interviews having been done over the years, stories in Rolling Stone, things like that. You culminate it all in a really nice progression through the history of Van Halen. From Eddie's point of view, which I really like, one of the details in the book that I never knew was when Eddie's father, Jan, died, who played on a Van Halen song at David Lee Roth's behest.
Yeah.
David Lee Roth called Eddie to give him his condolences, even though they were having like a flame war in the press.
And you have to realize that was late 1986, and things between Van Halen and David Lee Roth couldn't have been worse. And the thing is that Dave loved Eddie's dad. I mean, he loved him. Dave's dad was a very prominent physician, and Ed's dad was a musician.
Yeah.
So Dave loved Jan. He loved him. And he was, I think that was the greatest thing too. Was that Big Bad Bill on Diver Down? If anybody wants to look it up, that's Eddie and Alex's father playing the clarinet on that. And they would never have done that if Dave had not brought it to the table and suggested it. So, Jan got his due after all those years of playing. That was the biggest break he ever got. But I just also thought it was really funny. But they asked if he would do it. If he would play with them when they played at the Forum in L.A., and he's like, "No way."
We're talking to Kevin Dodds, who wrote the book Edward Van Halen, a definitive biography, and Kevin had the poor judgment enough to include the transcribed interviews that Michaels and I did with Eddie Van Halen at a pretty dark period of his life. If you can, Kevin, how did you discover those interviews, and what made you want to put them in the book? Because they are not very flattering.
No. I was aware of the interviews at the time that they were going on. So that was, many years, 8 years ago when you guys did your first one. And you guys interviewed him 6 times between 2003 and 2006.
You know more than we do.
Yeah.
The main reason that I included that, and you guys may or may not know this yourselves, but that was all that he said during that time period.
He did no media at all?
Yeah, no. He did not do any interviews, nothing. He didn't do anything.
Well, you
he didn't
can
do
tell
any interviews.
That
you guys had him all to yourselves.
And you can tell in some of the early ones that he's clearly not happy that we were calling. But
no, yeah, he didn't. This is okay. I got to ask you a question.
Okay.
How did you get his phone number?
Well, Here's how it works. We traded like a couple of phone numbers from a celebrity for. That's just how it works with DJs. We hold on to. Hey, you have to interview so and so. I'll trade you
Tom Arnold
for
a player to be
Tommy
named later.
Chong,
Yeah.
and we just swapped phone numbers with a friend of ours.
Yeah, well, it was really obvious that when you first called him, he was like, "You got the wrong number."
Yep.
Like,
how'd you get this number, buddy?
But it was so cool how quickly he warmed up to you guys, though.
And at one point, he had given us his cell phone, his girlfriend's cell phone, and we had the studio cell phone. And then at one point, all of them are changed, all of them are disconnected, and he's done. So
yeah.
He woke up and realized.
He's very much about his own terms. And that's been since they first started the band and didn't want David Lee Roth in it, to even today. He's really private. Another line that I loved that I didn't know, because it was buried in an interview, after Eddie built 5150 on his property as a racquetball court because of the restrictions in his covenant. David Lee Roth said, you know what, that's great. He's got his own place. He'll probably die there. And that's exactly how his life was at its lowest point. He never left that studio.
Yeah, he would lock himself in there for
weeks,
3 to 4 days at a time. Days.
Yeah.
Straight. And then come out and sleep for a couple days. And it is. I mean, David Lee Roth is an amazingly intelligent human being. And
maybe that'll be your next book, Kevin. Well, there's already.
Yeah, he wrote a damn good one himself.
Yeah.
And I did reference that many times because, I had to reference Valerie and Dave and Tammy's books, to get the part of the story that no one was telling it. But the one thing I want to really give you guys credit for is that, I don't know, by the 3rd or 4th interview, I think it was the one that was right after the 2004 tour, which, we all know that did not go well.
No.
And you guys really ratcheted up, and you were really serving as fan advocates. Like if there was any fan that could sit down and talk with him and say, look, man, you have all this music, please put it out, put some of it out. And, you guys probably reread that where he said, I've got enough music for 20 albums if I were to drop dead. And then you said, well, it shouldn't take you to drop dead for that to happen. That was one of the, to me, of all the moments of all the interviews that you guys did with him, that was the one that just really floored me.
But he didn't care.
And I give you guys just all the credit in the world for saying that to him.
Well, we can't take too much credit for it because we were getting hammered on Van Halen fan site. There's people from Italy and stuff that were emailing us. Why don't you ask them some real questions, man? Quit.
Yeah.
Well, the book is out now. You can pick it up, hardcover, softcover. It's on Amazon. You can get the Kindle version. Edward Van Halen, A Definitive Biography. And we've got a copy. We can give this one away.
We
correct?
got 2 copies, I think. And Kevin, you did a hell of a job on the book. You can tell you're a fan, and you can also tell that you put a lot of effort into capturing his life for anybody who didn't know him. They would know him after this book for sure.
Well, thanks, man. And like I said, it was just I could not believe in the marketplace that the book didn't exist already. And
lucky break for you.
I was just like, I've got to do this. And the other thing is, like, I can play. Anything from the first 6 albums myself. I grew up learning that, so it's like I come from a really unique kind of spot that child.
Yeah.
I could play all of this stuff, and I know I'm a writer, and in the publishing industry, and I've read 100 rock biographies. So that's kind of where I'm coming from. But
well, we're going to give away a couple copies of the book, and thanks for sending these to us. And
yeah, no problem.
All right, man. Thanks for chatting with us.